Welcome to the Fireside, your home of politics, polity, and policies. My name is Hesbon Hansen Ochieng-Owila, and today I'm joined by Rachel Omolo, who is a policy and governance expert, and my friend Dismas Mokua, who is a political risk analyst. A lot of things have happened in the last 1 week. We've seen the president announce a new cabinet in completion. The vetting has been taking place. But most interestingly, we've also seen some next generational catfight between what you would consider the young leadership across the political divide. The catfights in UDA, where the Secretary General, Honorable, the Senator, Malala, has been ousted as the Secretary General of the United Democratic Alliance. We've also seen a new generation of leaders from Western Kenya come together saying that they don't believe in the leadership that we have today, and they're working on a new way forward, deciding who is going to be their friends and who they're going to work with. I'm privileged once again to be in the company of Dismas Mokua and Rachel Omolo. Dismas, what do you say about the new generational catfight? What we are seeing in UDA, what we are seeing between Babu Owino and Governor Sakaja, the things that we are seeing happening, young leaders coming together from across the board. What do you have to say?
Well, I'm not sure whether it's a next generation catfight, because where is the metamorphosis? It happened after President Ruto nominated 4 ODM leaders to join his administration. And then all of a sudden, the so-called next generation leaders come up and they say they want to go back to the Mlembe nation and consult with the people. So it means that had the president not nominated these 4 persons, then we wouldn't have had the emergence of the so-called next generation leaders. So for me, it appears to be a case of sour grapes. Probably they were expecting Raila to present their names. He did not. And then, actually, one would actually say that they want to nationalize their personal problems or their personal ambitions. Because one would suspect that if, say, Sifuna's name had been in the list, or Malala's name had been in the list, and the others you've been mentioned, then nobody would be making noise. Nobody would be talking about it. But then you realize they said they were going to have a meeting on a Monday. Before then, there was a big meeting at Serena where there was a lineup from across all the political parties. Yeah. But on Monday, there were only 3 leaders who showed up. Governor Natembeya, Senator Malala, and another individual whose name I can't recall his name. So it actually means that the entire movement has died because now the politicians have aligned to their party leaders' interests, which confirms one fact, that after that meeting, there was probably a riot act, and they were told that if you know what is good for you, don't show up. Now, when Senator Malala showed up at the Mlembe meeting
in Kakamega,
yep, you know what happened last Friday. So he has been penalized for that. But so in my view, there's nothing like next generation leaders.
But you see, Dismas, if you situate this broadly within the context of what has been happening, you're thinking that maybe this consciousness that has been brought forth by the Gen Z's-led revolution was probably speaking to, the leadership that we have at the moment, the leadership that has been with us since the 1992 to date. And one would expect that the young leaders in all these political parties would distinguish themselves, something akin to the young Turks of the 1992. The only difference is, whereas the young Turks of 1992 came together, supported the older generation back then, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Kenneth Matiba. But then, with time, we saw them retreat into tribal cocoons. What we are seeing today is probably young leaders from different political parties that are a bit tribal coming together. What do you think about this? Are they missing, an opportunity to distinguish themselves by coalescing around tribe again?
Thank you. I think majorly, the way our politics is construed, we first coerce as a community first to get the strength to go out and look for other people to support our bid. So it's not something different from the older politics that we have been seeing. What I expected to see is them taking advantage of the Gen Z's protests and coming out strongly and putting it across to the political parties that it is time for us to see younger people being appointed, not seeing the leaders that were nominated by the president coming from even the, let me speak like for ODM, where we're seeing the older people, actually they're all 50 and above, being appointed or being nominated or being suggested names to the president. So I expected people like Sifuna and the like to come out strongly and say it is time for us also to be on the decision-making table, not just supporting political parties, but then after that you use our support for you to gain whatever you want to gain from the government. And I think it's also, as Dismas has said, it is high time for us young people, the younger generation or the upcoming leaders, talk of Sakaja, Sifuna and the like, are not to coalesce on tribal line. Let us see them come together, call people from Mombasa, Coastal Region, Eastern Region. Then we form something that any other person would admire of a younger generation. That this is how we want our politics to run, not the usual way of how do we start it from our local region. Because some of these people, if you look at them, where do they want to vie again?
You know, I don't understand what Madam is talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Because the people you have mentioned,
Yes.
all of them are elected leaders. You're talking about Governor Sakaja. He's an elected governor in Nairobi. You're talking about Malala. He was heading UDA. You're talking about Sifuna, an elected senator for Nairobi.
What I'm saying...
What other opportunities do they need?
But I think...
the people who were nominated or the proposed names by the president, they're from political parties. Then why didn't we see the president picking Sakaja? Why didn't we see the president picking Malala? Why didn't we see ODM picking Sifuna?
So for you, your issue is the birthday.
And again, if you look at the group, the team that went to Serena and of course the 3 people who went to Kakamega, they are from the same community. And that is where I'm drawing my argument. Why can't they then, if they want to be a stronger force, like we saw with the Gen Zs, they were drawn from all over the country. Why can't we see them even picking younger women from other places as well, so that we see them like, we want a generational change. We don't want the usual, first of all, trying to have a tribal line argument of politics, then is when we push our agenda ahead after we have decided, as a Milembe nation, what is in it for us.
You know, one interesting thing, now that you've talked about tribal groupings, is that this is not just a group of young men, from, the Mulembe nation, from the Western region, who are coming in to assert themselves. And you can actually talk about, sour grapes. They are probably disappointed that they didn't get as many young people appointed in these cabinet positions. But there is one statement that they made at Serena that was very interesting, that there isn't leadership in the Luhya nation. And you look at the current dispensation, the prime cabinet secretary, who has been the acting cabinet secretary for all the other ministries, is from their region. The Speaker of the National Assembly is from their region. And then one of the key person who was part of this conversation saying that they're seeking for leadership that will represent them is actually the Secretary General of the ruling party, UDA. What does that say about the current leadership? When you look at it from a policy and in a political perspective, where is that breach? And then you have a young man, a very young, industrious advocate of the High Court, came out, declared himself the Secretary General of UDA. What does that tell us about these political parties? Is it that you just declare yourself, and was Malala an interim or the substantive Secretary General?
First, I think for the Malala's case, it was just a point of when was this to happen, not really whether it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. It was just a matter of time that Malala was going to be ousted. Mm-hmm. Because one we saw before, I think a bit of last year, when there were a lot of issues within UDA, and they were feeling like he's not serving them the way they wanted the UDA Secretary General to serve them. That first, he appears to be very arrogant and all that kind of accusation levied upon him. So I think it was just a matter of when, and this was all stage managed, if you asked me, because you cannot just wake up from nowhere in an institution, because a political party is like an institution, which has laws, it has bylaws, and it has regulations on how they even elect leadership. and you wake up and say, I am now your new Secretary General, not appointed by anyone. There was no PG that was called, and there he was. And after, I expected the same advocate to come out when Hassan Omar was now appointed by the same PG. That now, why is it a different person, whereas I'd also shown interest?
Okay.
Why is he so quiet? Why is he so quiet? So I feel that was stage managed for them to just find an easier way. And given that Malala,
this I think this is interesting.
There was no stage management.
No, look at it this way. I mean, if Joe Allende came out and say that, our Secretary General has gone against the president, is not serving the interest of the party, I am now the new Secretary General, it was kind of bloodied. I mean, it was very unfortunate to see young men engage.
Blood on his face.
Yes, blood on his face, and she was being, told by his supporters that you need to seek medical attention and all that. Then we have the National Executive Council of UDA come out strongly, and through the leadership of Governor Cecil Mbarire, and have a deliberation. Then we have Hassan Omar acting. What does that say about the ruling party? Now that you're saying it was not stage managed, do you think that they came in at the right time? Do you think that this is something that they ought to have averted even before it unfolded in the public the way it did?
First of all, let's establish the role of an SG in any political party. You are supposed to offer leadership guided by the party leader. So one of the first things you must do as an SG, especially in Kenya today, is to go back in history and read the books of KANU and find out how Honorable J.J. Kamotho succeeded. As a political party leader, you're supposed to feel the heartbeat. Sorry, as an SG, you're supposed to feel the heartbeat of the party leader. You're supposed to anticipate what he's going to say. And you're supposed to dance within that space that has been created for you. Mm-hmm. The moment your interests are not aligned with the party leader, the moment your interests are not aligned with the party members, then you have no business serving in that political party.
But this must, do you want us to run political parties like that? What if the interest of the party leader is not aligned to the wishes and aspirations of people who voted for the political party? Do you go with the people, or do you go with the interest of the party leader, who, for all intent and purposes, has remained sort of very silent as this is happening?
Mm-hmm. Now, you've introduced the theory. You're talking about the ideal political party, which is anchored in an ideology. Maybe you are a green party, maybe it's about climate change, it's about Ujamaa. But in Kenya, the situation of change, actually not only in Kenya, but let's look at Kenya. In Kenya, our political parties, as you have said times above number, are no more than special purpose vehicles. The party leader has got the yam, and the party leader has got the knife. He does as he pleases. If you're not going to dance to his drum beats, and you think you've got political capital, you go out and establish a political party of your own, and then you come and compete with him. That is the formation of all the political parties we have in Kenya. Now, for Senator Malala, he was not an elected SG. He was appointed. So when you've been appointed, you need to consult the party leadership to understand what they're talking about. When the president says jump, you don't ask why, you ask how high. Now, we've given the local example in Kenya, but a similar situation is obtaining in the US. Mr. Donald Trump and the Conservative Party. Majority of the conservative leadership today, including George Bush and others, they say they cannot recognize the Conservative Party today.
Are you talking about the Republican, the GOP, or the...
I mean, they're called conservatives, essentially the Republicans. Okay. I've read a number of books, so I'm able to interact.
The Duke of Mosocho himself.
Now, they're saying that the Republican Party has now become a cult. Mm-hmm. The Republicans were very strong on marriages. They were very strong on the rule of law and order. But when you look at Donald Trump, it does not represent what the actual conservatives do. So right now, everybody has been beaten into one nice row within the Conservative Party. So even when within the Republican Party. So even when you come to Kenya, when you are given a role, you must respect the political party leaders, and you must respect the people working with your party leader. So that when President Ruto said that we are going to form a broad-based government, you cannot immediately go and do a news conference and say, we want to review our position. And then you go ahead and say, there's no leadership from Western Kenya, while President Ruto has nominated persons from Western Kenya to join his administration, and you already have Musalia Mudavadi, and you already have Moses Wetangula. So what are you telling the president, who is your party leader? In essence, you are casting aspersions on his capacity to lead. And the way Rich has indicated, he should have read the signs and take a walk long time ago. But did you realize that when Ismail Tarat, he actually went to the tribunal to get papers to stop the process?
Yes. And the process wasn't stopped. What,
it took place in the morning.
Yes. Now, let us come back to ODM. If we have Malala facing challenges because he has taken a position that is sort of contrary to the position that the party leadership has taken, what is happening in ODM? Because in the same group, we had the Secretary General of ODM. He's not elected. He's not, endorsed by anyone. He's just appointed, like Senator Malala. Are we seeing a new consciousness? Are we seeing young people being pushed or forcing themselves out of this to create another force that probably would resonate with the consciousness occasioned by the Gen Z revolution?
I think first we need to be alive to what really generated all this that is happening. And as you mentioned in your opening remarks, I think we've seen our political party, especially ODM, now, quote unquote, have given 4 of their members working now with the government. And I think some of these young leaders did not expect this. They never anticipated it. They never saw it come. So it's like a shocker. I mean, we are here, we are advocating for these ideologies, and you're telling me now we are going to sing this narrative. It's still not coming. They couldn't fathom that. So that's why I think if you read what the SG of ODM spoke about, at the initial stages, they were like, the party position is this. We are not in support what the 4 people, especially the 2 members of parliament, have done. That is the minority leader by then, that was Opio Wandai, and the park chair, Mbadi. That we are not in support. Even our deputy party leaders are leaving us or agreeing to work with the government. And then later on, Baba also sent a statement saying this is still our position, but we give them our blessing. So I think it was just a matter of we are not ready for this now. We had not seen this come. So how then do we position ourselves? How then do we make people realize that we are still also there and we have a voice? So they decided to caucus as young leaders. But unfortunately, they did that and repeat. As Mulembe Nation, how I wish they called on other young leaders to also come and air their views and also in support. Because if you look at after their meeting at Serena, we had Honorable Misi. The moment Honorable Misi heard that he would be the possible park chair, he left them.
Bolted
out. What did I tell you? It is all
It
about
confirms-
selfish interest.
It confirms what we said earlier on, that it is a story about sour grapes.
Yes.
And Rachel, you really keep on shocking me. How can anybody be in ODM and not know that Raila has got a very high capacity for handshakes? Every time he loses an election, or as Zawila would say, every time he doesn't win, probability of a handshake is 100%. Now, my view would be, if you are unhappy with what President Ruto has done and you're in UDA, you take a walk. If you are in ODM, you are unhappy with what Mr. Raila Odinga has done, you take a walk, you go and establish one political party, you come up with force.
One interesting...
we are in a democratic society.
I'm not looking at it from theory. I'm looking at it from
It's
real
not theory,
politics.
because you see, like Babu stood his ground and said, no, I'm not in support of this. So do you expect Babu to resign?
Has he defected from ODM?
No, he hasn't.
If you're unhappy with your party, what do you do?
No, because we are in a democratic political party and each and everyone is
You actually
entitled to
believe
their
ODM
voice.
is a democratic?
I think I totally agree with you. The only thing I'm seeing is you're talking in the past. There's a new reality. There is a new reality, and my thinking is there are leaders who have to, wake up to the new reality. There's a generation of leaders who probably won't care much because they're in their sunset days, twilight of their political careers. But there's a new consciousness that young leaders must be alive to. That even if it is a question of a political party taking direction, the bulk of the voters come 2027 are going to be these young people. And I don't think these young people are going to be tribal, are going to be ethnicized in the way they are going to vote. But having said that, I think
I can bet my head that in 2027, when the rubber is going to meet the road, people will go back to their tribal nations and they'll start asking themselves, what is in it for us?
Yes.
The same thing Rachel is talking about, that how come it's only the so-called next generation leaders from the Mlembe nation who are disappointed?
Because I think it's fairly easy to tell why it is that generation of leaders from the Mulembe nation. And it has been fairly easy for the other nations to be whipped because of a very powerful, political or tribal kingpin. You look at the Nyanza region. I mean, Raila is powerful, and we know that. So whipping them along a certain direction is fairly easy. But in the Mulembe nation, you can look at it differently.
If you say that I expected central people to be more agitated.
No, Central definitely. I mean, we are talking about Central that voted for the first time in a very divisive way, and I think that has continued. They feel disenfranchised from this guy. But let us move on this conversation, because what occasioned all this was the Gen Z revolution, which forced the president to dissolve cabinet and then appoint cabinet. And then what we have is a broad-based government. We've seen them being vetted in parliament. And when I come back to you, Dismas, take us through the whole process. How has it been? What do you think? What are the things to watch out for? And was the vetting really a rigorous process worth its while?
In my view, the vetting the vetting in Kenya has been borrowed, or we are trying to emulate the US.
Yep.
When our architects of the Kenyan Constitution saw the vetting at the Senate, they said this is something worthwhile. Let's go and try it back at home. So it's part of our Constitution. And the vetting is supposed to establish that the nominees have capacity and competence in their dockets. But in my view, it has faced three fundamental challenges. Number one, the members of the vetting committee, they're asking questions not as members of the National Assembly. They're asking questions as if they're representing people from their constituencies. So every member posing a question, the question is anchored from Tharaka Nithi, the question is anchored from their constituencies, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Wetangula, has been reminding them that we are here as members of the National Assembly. So when you're asking questions, look to establish the capacity and competence of the nominee using Kenya, using the Kenya nation. Not going back to your tribal cocoons. That is number one. Then number two, there is this elephant in the room called wealth declaration, which in my view is a complete waste of time. Now, speaking from an accounting perspective.
But wait a minute, Dismas, before you go to wealth declaration, because I think that was a very interesting, we've seen a lot of conversations around it. But this is the fireside. This is a conversation that is supposed to be very vibrant. If my MP, for instance, Junet Mohammed from Suna East, probably representing the wider Nyanza region, does not ask questions that are relevant to the region in the name of being the National Assembly, don't you think he faces a lot of backlash from the people from his background?
So in other words, you're suggesting that the vetting is supposed to be done behind cameras, or rather in cameras, so
no.
that you don't see. Because majority of those people are actually the members of the National Assembly in that committee. They are dancing to their constituencies. They're dancing to the public gallery. That is why they're not asking solid questions. Like for instance, when you have I wanted to use an example which may be extreme,
okay.
But this MP was describing body parts of a male, that this male was not admitted to KDF on account of this. And you know that everybody is watching, so I found it to be a bit unpleasant. But even before we go to the wealth declaration, maybe this goes to Rachel as a public policy and governance expert. What are we learning from this vetting process?
First, I think, let me say this on what we like us earlier. I think some of these personalized questions that they were asking the nominees were because people were sending them also text, ask this on our behalf. What are you going to do? I come from this region where we've not seen power, God knows for how long. With this new nominee, are we likely to see any improvement in last mile distribution? Are we likely to see, better sanitation, for example, for the docket of water and sanitation, such like things. So I think they were personalized in the sense that I come from this constituency, we've not seen this service delivered, and as your constituent, I would want to know, since you are there as a member of the vetting committee, would you ask this on our behalf? Because we are the ones suffering. So I think they were relevant to some extent, and also it speaks that, it also makes us understand that the people who are vetting are also listening to the constituents wherever they were posting those questions from. So I don't think if we should pin them because some of them chose to go that direction in asking questions, but I think it's because the members or the citizens were asking them directly to ask. And yeah, I've had a bit of issue with the manner in which the vetting process is done. It's more friendly. I mean, you're looking for a job here. Someone says, but I know you, you're my friend. I was with you, you're my roommate. I mean, how then am I supposed to, and you are the chair of the vetting committee, and you've already said, I am your friend. I was with you in campus. You are my roommate. And the story goes. So by the time we want to look at you as Rachel with capacity or Dismas with the ability to execute this particular role, then we tend to, as if you listen to the committee well, when they're asking questions, and of course the ice had been broken completely. So it was more of a friendly discussion than the vetting that we would want to see. We would want to see a very robust thing. If someone has been found guilty or there's any allegation of corruption, like in the cases that we've already had, what are you talking about it? Why are you asking someone? I heard police came to your house, but you know.
No, but if you have to break it down, say, if the chairman of that committee, Honorable Wetangula, called you and said, I understand you're a public policy expert, and you give me 3 items that I should be looking for, so as to guide this committee in the vetting process. What are those 3 things that you tell?
One, integrity is very key.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you establish integrity?
Chapter 6 is very clear, very, very clear on what we look into when we talk about integrity.
Professor Gidu Miguel would say that the law is not clear, so I don't know.
That's why I'm giving reference to chapter 6 of the Constitution, which talks about integrity. If you're found with any corruption allegations, ideally we should not even see you being vetted. Because you're someone on a radar, people are watching you. What are you going to do about this? There are these cases over you. You've not been found guilty, yes, but there are cases. So can you step aside? Let's get someone else. If you've been cleared of them, then that's it. Because these are not just mere allegations that we are seeing. They are issues of serious corruption dealings that we've seen in the country. So for me, one will be integrity. Secondly will be the capacity. Are you able? Do you have an understanding of the docket that you've been given? Some of them really, they demonstrated a good understanding of the dockets that they've been given, whereas others, they found it like, okay, it's an opportunity for me to be seen on air. You know, so I would be very keen to look at the integrity issues about an individual. I'd be very keen to look at the capacity, and of course, do you have the requisite documents or credentials that will enable you to perform your duty? Because just picking someone because they're your friends or not, it doesn't really work well. Because at the end of the day, remember, you're going to be in a docket where you're going to be reporting, or the people reporting to you are professors. So what are you really going to discuss with them?
Now, you've raised a very fundamental issue. Let's go to Professor. Professor, do you think the members of the vetting committee outside the chairman have got capacity and competence to establish whether the nominees have got capacity and competence in the dockets?
Well, I think they do. I think, members of parliament who sit in these committees have, very solid backup of experts in different fields who do for them research, furnish them with the right information. And I think by the time they sit in front of the cameras for Kenyans to see how they're fielding questions to the nominees, they have everything.
So are you suggesting that the fact that you can convince people in Suna East to vote for you, you go to the National Assembly, then now you have capacity and competence to vet a nominee to the cabinet? That's the first question. Mm-hmm. And then the second question, there is this conversation that has been going on for a long time, that for you to be a leader in Kenya, you need to have a degree, a bachelor's degree. Does a bachelor's degree add value to leadership in Kenya? And because you're a researcher, is there actually evidence that having a degree, because every governor must have a degree, is there evidence that counties in Kenya have been run very well because the governors have got degrees?
I think for the first question that you asked, that if you're elected a member of parliament, does it necessarily mean that you have what it takes to be in a committee and do the vetting or in any other committee? And the answer is simple, that for you to find yourself in a committee, there is I mean, there's some requisite qualifications that you must have for you to be in a parliamentary committee. If you have an education background, there's a high likelihood that you'll find yourself in an education, kind of committee. Now, the appointment committee is a committee that brings on board individuals who have what it takes on the basis of their track record, their experience in parliament, and of course, their qualifications. So it is not just a question of you're a member of parliament from Kieni or Suna East or Suba, you sit in the committee. And then number two...
Just on that, before you move to number two, again, when you talk of capacity this much, we are not just talking about your individual capacity. That's why this Wabunges, they have people who do research for them, so that where you don't have an understanding, they're given the information that they really need to ask this mass who is a nominee for a particular field.
Now you opened the Pandora's box.
But
you also need capacity to digest this information.
Yes, so but
now the degree comes in.
Yes, that's
okay.
You see, first of all, the inclusion criteria to a committee probably is based on the fact that you have the capacity to digest this information, and then secondly, you are given an infrastructure that supports you in doing that. But coming back to the issue of the degree, governors, members of parliament, or anyone who has a degree, education has one of the domains that is called the normative domain. And the normative domain basically says that the mere fact that you go through an education system, there are certain norms, that are instilled in you. There is a big difference between someone who has gone through a degree process in a university and someone who has not gone through that. So the fact that you hold that degree in itself means that there are certain norms that you have accumulated and you have a universal understanding of things, and you have the basic understanding of the principles that can help you anchor yourself anywhere and make robust contribution. And in as much as I don't think there is any data to show whether the governors who have degrees and advanced degrees have distinguished themselves, because for the simple reason that there is no comparative study you can do. You must have a degree for you to be a governor. But there are so many intervening factors, in the Kenyan governance system, that you have a degree, but there are so many other things like corruption and all that, which come to the fore. But you can easily tell that education, even if education does not have value, the thing with education, there's a theory in education called the mirror hypothesis. It is education that distinguishes people who can do something better and people who can't do it better. So the mirror hypothesis basically speaks about education may not add value to you, but education will tell us the difference between guys who've gone through that education system. So it will mirror. You don't go through education to become a doctor, but education will tell us how good a doctor you're likely to be. Which for me is very critical, that we know that if you've gone through an education system, we know that you distinguish yourself as a lawyer, you distinguish yourself as a teacher, and when you get to parliament, we put you in the right committee. But coming back to what you said, I think there's a lot that we expected from the committee that was vetting these cabinet secretaries, including the kind of questions that they were asking, and I think we are coming back to that conversation.
But let's go now to the issue of the wealth declaration.
Yes.
I wanted to discuss it, but you appeared uncomfortable. I don't know why.
No, I wanted you to have a special discussion.
And the wealth declaration. Yes. For instance, if somebody has got an acre, and this is just for conversation purposes, an acre, say, in Lavington, probably he bought it for $1 million bob. There are three ways of doing valuation today, essentially three ways.
Yep.
One, you can look at how much did I buy this piece of land for? 100 million Kenyan shillings. So you declare 100 million. Mm-hmm. Or you can go to the market rates. Maybe the market rates today suggest 200 million. So you declare 200 million. Or you can say that this piece of land, if I project for the next 50 years, how much money is it going to give me? So you say maybe 500 million. So you declare 500 million. Now, my biggest challenge with the wealth declaration, everything is done by the individual. It's some sort of a self-assessment. So you assess yourself and you present a figure. My view would be, because again, we shouldn't be in the business of describing problems without giving solutions. Yep. My view would be, for this thing to make sense, they should come up with a standardized form on wealth declaration. That if you've got land, it's going to be valued at market rates by a professional valuer. Because what I've seen a number of people who have been vetted, they do, is they say, my 10 acres in Kitale, inaweza kuwa ni pesa ngapi? When they're having a cup of coffee, then they put down a figure. So it's not accurate. That's number one. Number two, a number of the people who have been vetted, their assets, or rather their wealth, over the last 20 months have gone up by 200 million on average, others 100 million. But they have not bothered to tell us what have they done over the last 20 months to grow their wealth by this amount of money. And most of them indicated that they're working full-time for the administration.
They don't even have time for
They have
themselves.
no time for other businesses. So how come their wealth has, most of them, grown in leaps and bounds? So one is, people are asking very fundamental questions. If you have got capacity to improve your wealth over this short space of time, and you are in the cabinet, how come you're not seeing Kenya growing at that level? Because if you've got capacity to work on your bank balance, then you should be doing the same for the nation. So in my view, in future, it needs to be rigorous and structured. You've declared today you're worth X. Next time when you tell us it's now Y, give us the progression. And in my view, KRA should develop interest in these conversations to find out that if your assets have grown by 200 million, have you paid an equivalent tax? But one issue that I found very interesting, and that is how Rachel steps in, is vetting as an accountability mechanism.
Before Rachel steps in, this is the Fireside, your home of politics, policy, and polity. And you can join the conversation on our social media platforms, which are at the bottom of your screen. Join the conversation. Tell us where you are consuming this content from, what your take is on the discussions that we're having here. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Yeah, the whole concept of wealth declaration is about accountability and transparency in the manner in which you acquire the wealth, just as what you're saying. But then I expect, of course they do have a form. I heard you saying that they should have a form they fill. There is a form that they fill. But for me, it's not just a matter of filling the form.
Yeah.
It's about filling the form and having supportive documents to support the claim that I am worth 500 million. Then it's because I have this land in rural LR number, you get? I have this property, I have this watch, I have ABCD, like Joho was saying. I mean, one of my most invested in watches. So
chronometers.
So you should tell us how many they are, and also if you for sure bought a genuine, we always get certificates. So you're
suggesting you have a certificate for this?
Of course I do. Yeah. For all this, I have a certificate. So it's a matter of accountability. So give us the supportive documents of the claim you're making. You cannot just wake up and say, over 20 months, my wealth has tripled. Like I saw one of the CSs, former CS, she was at 100 and now she's at almost 300 million. You see, so what is there to show how you generated this income? What proof do we have for sure that now that the last time you are vetted, you are at 100 million, this is how you've grown your wealth? But again, allow me to think differently about what you said. When you're talking about an individual being too busy to run their businesses, as long as the structures are there, then you don't have to sit in your office for it to really run. You can just appear there once or twice in a month.
Rachel,
you don't have
Rachel,
literally, you mentioned that they have to be there.
No, Rachel.
But I don't think if you really have to be there,
Rachel,
as long as you have proper structures within the organization that can run for you the business, you've also you've employed expertise. So I don't think if we can hold them.
Yeah, like
yes. The critical question here, Rachel, is not they have structures that can run their businesses. The critical question here is if you can make tens of millions as an entrepreneur, and you're saying that public service is a thankless job, you don't even sleep, you don't even have time for yourself, and you're making the bare minimum. Actually, you're not even making progress in your day job. But then you're an entrepreneur outside there, you've put up structures that are making tens of millions within months.
In your absence.
In your absence. So where are you better off serving Kenyans? Are you better off serving Kenyans in this position where you're not making headway? Or you're better off being freed? Because it is the same economy you're going to contribute to. If by not working in your business, you're making tens of millions, what if we put you in your business and tell you, now continue, now make hundreds of millions? You'll make a better contribution to the economy. And number two, you know, some of these things you're talking about, I think these are questions that are very real. These are conversations that are very real that should be picked by the relevant authorities. There is no sense of asking people to declare their wealth if they will tell you that they've been doing business without a corroborating entity saying that this is the business they've been doing, they've been making billions or millions, and this is the tax that they've been paying. It is a charade, and I think we need to run away from that. Unless there are structures that will tell us that this is legit business, this is not legit business. Because someone can't just wake up and tell us, I've made hundreds of billions because I'm a businessman. What business are you
And before
doing?
Rachel comes in, just to buttress your point, if as a CS you've got capacity to set up infrastructure, a system to turn out obscene profits, give you obscene incomes when the economy is struggling, why can't you do the same in your docket?
Yep.
Given the fact that you already have a system which is working, that you've not been part of the system for the last 20 months, and now you've got a docket full time. Maybe you're in charge of food security, maybe you're in charge of mining, whatever docket it is. Why can't you use that same capacity, that Albert Einstein IQ, that you've used in your business, which is making you make money in truckloads, whether or not it's been supported? Why can't you apply the same logic in your docket? Because most of them who came there, they were patting themselves on the back. But in substance, they had nothing to take to the back that this is what I've actually done. So that is the question that you must answer.
But I think...
I want to be the devil's advocate in response to this. Yeah. Maybe that's the reason as to why the president decided, let me bring you, because I've seen what you're doing and your contribution in the society. So you bring that, how you manage to turn around with the hard economic times and the very volatile business environment that we've been having. You've managed to sincerely, within 20 months, managed to raise over 200 million in terms of profit, or whatever way they did it. So I think maybe if you look at when the former president Uhuru Kenyatta picked his cabinet, majority were from the private sector as well, and that was contributed by or attributed by their contribution in the different sectors they were in. So maybe the president is borrowing from that. That's why I said, let me be the devil's advocate. Maybe the president is borrowing from that. Then if you're able to turn around your business in this manner, then maybe you're the right person to come and tell us that what do we need to do, for example, in mining.
But what does the scoreboard say 20 months later? That the personal scoreboard is smelling like a red rose. But in your docket, there's no red rose. The scoreboard is yawning. That is the question that you must answer. You proclaim yourself as the devil's advocate.
Yeah,
so
and I think
the question that you must
I
answer.
think, and I think it's a very difficult question to answer. And I mean, if you look at all these appointees, these are people who can deliver. I mean, being a cabinet secretary is basically at the policy level. And I think working with, the spirit of the broad-based government, there's room to consult from both sides of the political divide. I mean, ODM right now is both in Azimio and in Kenya Kwanza. And I think they will benefit from that. Yeah.
No, it's true.
It is true. That's the reality on the ground. Yes, yeah. As a matter of fact, I think the president has done his part. I think Parliament has to distinguish itself, has to redeem itself. If there are gray areas, I think Parliament has, to run away from, doing things that are contrary to the public expectations. There is a public expectation. These people have presented themselves, and we've seen in terms of qualifications, they're all good. They can all do the job. But we must run away from this impression that we are creating, that for you to be a cabinet secretary, you have to be stinking rich, you have to be a millionaire. And I think it's incumbent upon the leadership of this country to start, driving conversations that will help people who are competent and are willing to drive this country to the next level take leadership positions, whether they are rich or not. But lastly, even as we come to a close on this, Rachel, what are we seeing going forward? What is your projection? What is your crystal ball telling you about the next 1 week, the next things that are likely to be happening? We have Raila Odinga, who presented his papers to be the next chair of the African Union Commission. We have this young group of Mulembe leaders still outside there. We don't know what will happen. What are you seeing in the next few days?
First, this coming week we expect Parliament first to, now that the vetting is over, for them to adopt the report from the vetting committee, and if that is adopted and submitted to the president, then we are likely to see the cabinet nominees being sworn in. So we'll be seeing the new face of Kenyan government in reality. And again, on the other flip side of politics, we know that His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka gave directive to his members of parliament that they shouldn't participate in the process. And we saw Mbui also participating. So I don't know whether there will be a show cause for him now that he was part of the vetting committee, or what is really going, or what action they are going to take as a party, because he gave a stern warning to his members not to participate in any way in the vetting process. And for the younger generation, we are seeing them, the younger leaders, I think they have now come to realization that politics is not about a threat that we can walk away and start our own, or we can decide. There's a reason as to why we have this older generation still holding on to power. And so we can only learn from them. So I expect more of them retracting back to their political bases again before they come out and say, this is the direction we want to take. Unless they see again people like, for the sake of Trans Nzoia governor, people telling him, you know what, yes, there's this Atawe movement, but it's not yet a political formation. So hold your horses lest you be impeached for defying the order.
Now, you know, talking about Tawe, Governor Natembeya says that, and his team, they said there's no leadership in Western Kenya. But they say charity begins at home. It may be very useful for Governor Natembeya to tell the entire nation, not Mulembe nation, Kenya, what he has actually done for his community from the time he joined the public sector. Because he looks at Speaker Wetangula, he says you have not done anything for the community. But can he actually tell us, in his capacity, as Governor Natembeya, what has he done for, even before he became governor, what has he done during his entire public sector life, and now in the elective position? And then Professor indicates that we should expect something from the so-called next generation leaders. If you're waiting for anything, you need to learn how to manage your expectations. Yeah, because there's nothing coming out of that. It's a case of sour grapes. That you are at home, you've done your press-ups, you've taken your coffee and the energy drink, hoping that the president at his news conference is going to read out your name is missing, and then you decide now to nationalize your personal interest to the extent that you are actually casting aspersions on the integrity of the leaders from your village. And then you raised something about Mr. Raila Odinga. In my view, every Kenyan should support Raila Odinga. There's been a lot of activity on social media, people saying that Raila should be taking this position. But my view is that if you've got talent in Kenya that can go to the international level, African Union, anywhere in the world, that talent must be supported to the hilt. So there are people on social media saying that it's the responsibility of the administration to create jobs for Kenyans in Kenya. My view is it's the responsibility of the administration to create jobs for Kenya anywhere in the world. For instance, Kenya has got a surplus of teachers. These teachers should be trained to go to countries like Angola that need Kenyans. We've got a surplus of, understand we've got a surplus of nurses. New Zealand, Australia, UK, they are crying for Kenyan nurses. So let's just produce human capital to take advantage of these opportunities. And something came up today during the vetting process about the Philippines, the way they've taken, they're all over the world. We should do that. If we don't do that, we are not going to get another Barack Obama. Because Barack Obama is a product of this thing.
Of export.
Yeah. So and for us to make our talent marketable, unfortunately in Kenya, the only languages we speak outside mother tongue is English and Swahili. In my view, the administration should consider making it compulsory for people outside English, Kiswahili, to do French or Arabic or Spanish or another language. Because the teachers we have in Kenya, if they were fluent in Portuguese, they would be in Angola today. So other people are saying, wait a minute, now you're taking people to the Middle East. But if you are in Suna East, you've got a bachelor's degree, you are a nurse. So should you sit back at home and you own the entire day because you're waiting for a role in the Kenyan government, or if there's an opportunity in Canada, you get a passport and you make your way to Canada. There's some people with myopic thinking. They've forgotten that it's now the globalization of markets and production. I suspect when you, I mean, as a professor, if you get today a role at Harvard, would you say no? Well, unless you're interested in politics.
I wouldn't say no. But as we bring this to a close, Dismas, there are people outside there who would say that the role of the government is to create jobs within the country, to ensure that we don't, help other countries build their economies and export their products to us. We should be the ones building our economy and exporting the byproducts. But I think I like the way we are coming to a close on this. Dismas has painted a very interesting two kind of pictures. There's a rosy picture around what the government can do to export jobs. But then there's a not so rosy picture, a very pessimistic view of what the young generation of politicians portend for this country, that they will have to coil back to their tribal cocoons or to the big political parties, so to speak. A lot to look forward to next week. We have Nane Nane coming in. We have, the AUC nominations that will come to an end tomorrow. I think the close is tomorrow. We'll get to see who are the other competitors facing the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. We wish him well. But from us, the team here, Rachel Omolo, governance and policy expert, and Dismas Mokua, who is a their political risk analyst. All we can say is that this is the Fireside, the home of politics, policy, and polity, where we illuminate and provide a platform for intelligible political, policy, and polity debates. Join us on our social media platforms. Until we meet next week, have yourself a blessed evening.